another episode of the Candice and Elisa show. Today, we're going to talk about the ship that was finally liberated from the Suez Canal, allowing traffic to freely flow again. But the one thing that we found very interesting was how this image of a tiny bulldozer next to the ship got taken and turned into all these different memes. My favorite one being about how we speak about unskilled labor, but 10% of the world markets were waiting for this guy to dig dirt, which I thought was a pretty fascinating way to put it. So Candice, what do you think about this?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. And I think, you brought this to my attention. And the one thing I really find interesting is, for me, it's very synonymous with life as we're living it currently, right? 2020, 2021. And I love that everyone's like, we're returning to a new normal. I'm like, we're returning nowhere. We need to be facing forward and figuring it out, okay? And what I find really interesting is, for me, I'm looking at how we're starting to view things differently, not because we want to, but because we have to, right? And I think for me, when you look at skilled labor or unskilled labor, as we put it in air quotes, you realize that, wait, what have we been valuing? Because right now I find that in all our careers, very practical to the point skills are required, right? Even when it's virtual, you need people who know how to operate under pressure. You need people who are like autonomous, that can work on their own without needing to be micromanaged. I mean, the skill sets we need have definitely changed from the skill sets we're accustomed to. So I think it's exciting. And that little bulldozer, like, I was like, you get it, sir. Like, you take your time and you show them.
I mean, I've always felt, and maybe this is because I grew up with academics in the household, but I've always felt that the value system, in terms of how much we pay people in certain categories, was off. Because we always talk about how important education is. Education is the legs we stand on. It can build societies and all these kinds of things. And yet in Mexico, I remember, like, the salaries for teachers are just absolutely abominable. And even around the world, I still think that teachers are really undervalued. It's almost seen as an expectation, but and we want every single professor and teacher to be excellent because obviously they're training the minds of tomorrow. We're not valuing them financially and saying, hey, this is really important work. And it just makes me think of this guy also, the legs we stand on, the people that pick up the trash every day, and they're picking up trash, your trash, my trash, everybody's trash. And it's, these are the people that sometimes are treated terribly. And I feel like we're lacking this connection of who are the legs you stand on and who lives in the shadows and doesn't get the recognition that they deserve. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's powerful. I think that's incredible because, I mean, now, I'm working on a more, like, I'll say, permanent in some ways. There's nothing permanent in our worlds. We know this, especially in the creative field. But I look at the team that brings together these summits and, like, the technical team, how they make us look so good, the lighting, everything, like, right? They really do the work that allows me and my co-host to shine. And I think sometimes, like, society looks at the faces, right? We look at your TV personalities, your Megyn Kellys, your Beyoncés. We're looking at all the front-facing people. And for some reason, we've been conditioned to believe they're the most important moving part of the cog. And I'm like, there's so much that's constantly happening behind the scenes. And I believe this to be true even with presidencies. I'm like, a president is a face of a party, right? Yet we look at it and we're like, oh my God, the president's got all the decision-making power. I'm like, simply the president is just the face. It's the face, it's like you being the brand ambassador of a company. You are the face of the company, but the decision-making has to go through a million different people. Exactly. And so for me, I'm like looking at it and I'm like, is this going to be something that allows us to shift our paradigm? Or are we just going to stay the same? We're going to pretend like this did not happen and just remain pretending like, the people that we see front facing are the most important moving part of a company or an organization or civilization, to be quite frank.
Yeah, and I went on a musical documentary streak recently where I watched a doc on Nina Simone and Dolly Parton. And what was really interesting was, there was a period with Nina Simone, which I didn't know this, where she was quite a person prone to depression. And there's a moment where she just removes herself from an incredibly successful career that had turned a little bit too political, which was kind of hindering her ability to become as big as she wanted to be. But she just removed herself and then got to a position where people were thinking that she was completely homeless. She'd lost her money. She was completely derailed, right? And it wasn't until friends and, you know, people that she worked with before literally picked her up and went, this is what's happening. And with Dolly Parton also, when she got to a certain age, people started to see her as a bit of a relic. And it wasn't until a new manager in 2004 came into her career and he said, no, 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 you know, you are epic. We're going to turn this around. And her career suddenly did such a shift. It was the largest tours that she'd ever done. And, you know, started breaking records even against younger generations and stuff. So you really go, it is fascinating how exactly what you're saying, you know, we have this front facing adoration for people, but we're never taking, you know, a moment to just go look at the managers, look at the tech, look at the, you know. And me with my background in cinematography and stuff, you know, I'm very, very aware in filmmaking and in all of these things how, you know, the technicians and everything, but even it's the team. It's, you know, you could not do your job if it weren't for every single person, you know, down to the person bringing coffees, wrangling cables. It's like they're the motors keeping the machine going. And this
Oh,
applies to all careers, right?
yeah, and all facets of society, right? It's not just like in our career elements where we're directly impacted. It's like what you said, the garbage collection people that come and pick up our trash every like week, you know, the people that are sweeping the streets. And for me, I think that's why I've always had a very strong disdain, I'd say, for people who treat those like service staff of any kind badly.
Yeah.
Because I always think to myself, like, do you have an understanding of how society and people run and function? And also, there's also a sense for me, how I judge you based on the reason I judge you based on how you treat others is because then I can see why you treat me the way you do, right? Because then I'll be like, oh, you're only good to me because you think I'm somebody. You're only nice to me because you think I'm attractive. You're only nice to me because insert whatever. But if I had to lose these things in your eyes, I'm no longer of value as a human being. And for me, that's what I never understand. It's kind of like gossip too, right? Like when people come to you and they're constantly gossiping, and I'm not talking about like when you really need to vent about something or someone, but they constantly have some bad things to say about other people. I don't trust you. Like I'll listen, but I'll be like, I don't trust you, bitch. You know, because I'm like, if you're saying this about every single person, including your mama and your brother and your cousin and I'm like, what you're going to say about me when I'm no longer in your life, or I'm, you know, maybe treating you in a way you don't like, right? And I think people fail to recognize that what you say about others and how you treat others says more about you than it does about the person you're mistreating, right? And so
100%. I mean, just as you were saying that, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but you know, sometimes when I was younger, I remember hanging out with people that might be very critical about everyone around them, but they weren't criticizing me to my face, right? So I was going like, oh, great, like I'm in the in club, I'm fine, I'm safe, right? And you're completely deluded into thinking that this is not happening until you discover that it's actually, you know, at least it's towards everyone. I mean, you know what you're getting when you're facing this, right? It's a transaction that's going to be even with everybody. But yeah, I think that's absolutely so accurate. And you know, I remember still going with my dad to school every day because he always took me to school growing up, but we were often in the same school and even in the same university. He was in university, I was in high school, they were together. And he would always spend, you know, a few minutes just saying hi to every security guard. And everybody knew him by his name, and he always knew him by his name. And he always said it's so important, you know, and he introduced me to the principal, but he also made sure that I knew their names and they knew me. And I just remember how wonderful it was because it felt so great to go into school because you knew the person that was going to greet you. They almost felt like a family. You know, it's like, you know, this person. And I even remember one time, I think I was late or I'd left something in my locker and the school had already closed or something like this. And I just went and I was freaking out because I needed to turn in an essay or whatever. And the guy, you know, was just like, oh yeah, don't worry, I'll open it for you, like this kind of thing. And I just went, wow, like this is so clear. Like if we were just this way to everyone, can you imagine? I mean, not that it's ever going to happen. For some
no.
reason people don't want to do this, but
But isn't it crazy that I actually think my life is richer for it?
Yes.
Right? When I am kind to other people, my life is so much more enriched by it. Like when I'm greeting, whether it be like when I get a smile from the teller or, from the security guard or whatever the case is, I feel great. And when I'm having friction, like when I moved into this new building, I had a bit of a situation with the security, we kind of had a bit of a misunderstanding and she elevated and I got really, impatient. And I was like, why are you yelling at me? And then I started, and I didn't like the person I was becoming because I just was feeling very frustrated. And I remember I got to my apartment and immediately I put everything down. I went back downstairs and I called my landlord and I said, what's the security guard's name? And I went downstairs and I said, hey, and I called her by her name and I was like, I want to apologize for the way I reacted. I'm like, yes, everything got out of hand, but I don't want you to ever feel as though I don't value your position. I don't value you. And I don't value the fact that you are here to keep me safe. And I think there was just a miscommunication issue. And I want to make you know that I am so sorry. And if I've ever made you feel uncomfortable, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And her response to me actually, like, I almost cried. I was like, oh. So she was like, no, you've always been one of the nicest people that's moved into the building. She's like, I felt bad. I felt like I needed to apologize. You've never made me feel any other way except like very kind. You're always greeting. You're always saying, how are you? And I remember almost crying because I was like, oh, and I thought to myself, I was like, I'm so glad that without me knowing it, I'd created an impression with her that I am not someone who's disrespecting you. I'm just a little frustrated at what's currently happening.
Yeah.
And she felt like, oh, she's actually a really nice person. We're both really frustrated right now. And it's still like, and I look at that small interaction that made me feel so like terrible. And I'm like, how do people go through life treating people like this? I'm like, I can't do it,
Well, but I think go ahead.
No, go on, go on.
Well, what I think what's so important about your story is that you took the initiative to actually make amends, because I think how many times does it happen that we view conflict as like an end mark? It's almost like the end of the story is like you have it could be a friend, it could be a relationship, or it could be your relationship with your security person or something. And you have a good rapport until you have a conflict. And then it's like, it's over. We're never going to talk again. We're never going to, and sometimes it just takes one person going, actually, I want to make amends, and realizing that conflicts are part of life. Right? And that there's a way to get over the mountain and carry forward.
I'm so happy you mentioned that. I'm so happy you mentioned that about conflict, because I used to be that person, the person you're describing, where like there's a big conflict and I just completely shut down. I remove myself, and I usually remove myself from the friendship or whatever it is. And the thing is, the irony of all of it, and you and I speaking about it, is when we first started working together on this podcast and on the show, we had a bit of a conflict, which was really misunderstanding, right? And it was the way my ability to take criticism, and like what I saw was criticism at the time, which you just intended as just like an off-cuff remark. And our ability to move through that and be like, hey, and I had to be like, listen, you triggered a part in me, and I had to let my ego die and be like, you know what, it's not about you. I feel very sensitive when people say this due to the way I was raised. And I have to be honest with you, because I valued you as a person and I valued what we were creating. And I think the way we moved through that was in in a way that actually made me feel more empowered to continue communicating, right? And I think you need moments like that where you're like, oh, wow, another human being can respect where I'm coming from without holding it against me. And I can do the same for them. That means I can keep doing this and have healthy relationships, right?
Yes. And I mean, I think that, not only is conflict a part of life, but it can also build stronger relationships. If you just have a completely peaceful, everything's wonderful all the time, you're not really kind of creating something that's strong enough to overcome a tempest. And a tempest will come sooner or later, right? So I think it's actually really good that when we were just starting out, that happened. Because it made us both take a step back and go, can we do this? Can we move forward through this? And it was a personal thought process, right? But I think we shared so openly. And it just goes to show, back then we were friends, acquaintances more than friends, really, right? And it's something that's built over time, but it just goes to show how important it is. We would have missed out so badly. If we said, no, we've had a conflict and we cannot get along anymore.
And you know what the irony of that is the fact that both of us came in and both of us are such hard workers, and we both in our own individual careers and, you know, towards any project we undertake, we perfectionists in many ways. We know how to get things done. We put in the time, we, you know, we want to get better and better and better. And I think we clashed in just the sense of like, both of us are really hardworking, ironically. And so it was like that clash of like, I'm really hardworking, you're really hardworking. Are we going to mesh this path? Because we were just, like, as you said, acquaintances prior. I mean, really close acquaintances to some degree, but we weren't friends.
Yeah.
And then we built, I think that already started, like, it allowed us to be able to say, let's figure out who we are from the most honest standpoint possible.
Yeah.
And I think that's what ended up allowing us to now, you like one of my closest friends now.
Yeah.
And it's because we opened ourselves up to getting to know each other from the most honest parts of ourselves, and constantly speaking every week, checking in on each other, making sure that we're still on the same page. And then we realized we actually so alike. So alike.
This is true. This is why some of the feedback we get from the show is, can you please have some conflict? Can you please disagree? And we're like, yes, we got it. And then we're like, yeah, I feel exactly the same.
And then we start a conversation and a really important topic that we're like, we're going to disagree on this. And then we start and then we end like, and so we agree once more.
No, I mean, one thing that I always think of is I once saw something in a couple that I have now taken into my relationship with Craig, which is that they had a bottle of wine that was saved for that big fight. And it's your big fight bottle of wine. We've taken it one step further, where we have it in a box with 2 letters that we wrote to each other. And so we know, like, if there's ever that big fight, I mean, I'm not saying that we don't fight, but just the big one, like a big fight that makes you want to get out of the door, right? You got to sit down, read the letters, open the bottle, relax, and then carry on talking. And I think that actually I would love to implement this with friendships as well, because I think it's just a wonderful way of looking at conflict and going, it will happen probably at some point, and we're prepared. And we will know what to do. But we've made a list of all the wonderful things that we love about each other, why I respect you, why I think you're fantastic. And let's just remember that. And sometimes that's the key in conflict. It's just that step back umbrella perspective that's lost so quickly when you're vibrating at this level.
That's so true. And I actually love that concept. I think it's brilliant. And I think for me, the only conflicts that can't be overcome on a personal level for me, I find, is betrayals. Like when I feel like I've been betrayed and I won't be able to rebuild that trust with you in a way that, you know, whether it's like, let's say your friend sleeping with your husband or, you know, some ridiculous thing like that. It's like, okay, I know there's no realm of reality I'll ever trust you again. So there's no point in me trying to figure this out and go through a, you know, conflict resolution thing with you, because I'm just never going to trust you. And trust to me is such a core base of a relationship, friendship, love relationship, all of it. And so if the trust in and of itself is, and I'm not talking about like, you know, mistakes, because they are, because I think it always, we need a different episode for this, but there'll always be moments, right? I was like, oh no, I'm diverging, I'm going off the freeway. But I think there will sometimes be betrayals that are unintentional. So betrayals that aren't like set to hurt you, right? But they sound or feel like a betrayal because of either past, you know, what's happened to you in the past or how you relate to certain things. And I think then it's important to talk, you know, but I think it's always from a standpoint of saying and asking yourself in a relationship of any kind, will I be able to trust you again? If that's your core quality. And if you know you'll never be able to rebuild that trust with someone in love or in a friendship, there's no use dragging it out, because no one wants to live under that umbrella of every single thing they do from here on out will always be like judged based on the premise of the one time they messed up. So for me, that's an important thing to do, you know, just understand your own value principle and what cannot be bridged for you, and then move from there.
And that can be hard, because oftentimes we don't want to face that reality, right? And sometimes we drag things along and just, you know, keep it going well past a point of no return. And that's also valid. I think the ability to part ways and to acknowledge when you've hit the end of the road and, you know, good riddance, I find you learn much more about a person in that moment than you often do in the whole time that you knew them. Because it's in the way of parting ways that you come to see how much true respect there was for each other and how kind someone can be at the worst part of the road, right? And that can be very painful.
That gave me chills. That gave me chills because it's so true. And it brought me back to a saying I once heard. You can tell a lot about what a relationship means to someone based on when they can't get anything else from you or something like that. So like if someone can no longer profit or, you know, be enriched by the dynamic, how they treat you then is more indicative of how they've treated you like when you could do things for them. And I'm like, boom, mind blown, right? And as usual, we could speak about this forever because it's such, I mean, look at where we started. Respect for labor ended at, you know, respect for yourself and others. But guys, please be sure to let us know, how do you feel about this topic? I know we covered a couple of things, but let us know what you feel, what you think, and yeah, we'll see you next week. Bye.